The Jeffrey Epstein case. 3 million pages. Letters, FBI reports, tons of dirty compromat on the global elite. It would seem like a triumph of justice. The U.S. Department of Justice opened the archives. But another 3 million files are still classified. Ready to review Epstein's files? As a vivid example, the trail led all the way to the Nobel Prize. Former head of the Nobel Committee, Thorbjørn Jagland, swore that he barely knew Epstein. But the archives exposed the lie. When the Norwegian police launched a corruption case, the politician disappeared. Then there was an alleged suicide attempt followed by resuscitation, and the investigation was quietly buried. And this is systemic. The current British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was a prosecutor in the past. It was under him that the Jimmy Savile case fell apart. The TV star and favorite of the Crown raped children for half a century. There were hundreds of victims. But under prosecutor Starmer, 114 volumes mysteriously disappeared from the case. Starmer knew where the evidence led. Savile was a member of a club of high-ranking ministers and lords. Their lair was located on the island of Jersey. Back in the 70s, they turned an orphanage into a brothel. In 2015, they tried to reopen the case. But the press found out that pedophiles from the government are being covered up by the intelligence agencies. The case was closed. And here's another example of Europe's black aristocracy. Belgium, the 1990s. The maniac Marc Dutroux kidnapped and killed children in front of cameras. After his arrest, he said, "I'm just a link." The European elite used the services of this network. The investigation lasted 8 years. During this time, key witnesses, police officers, and prosecutors, one after another, committed suicide. In the end, the authorities chose the convenient version. Dutroux acted alone. Israel, present day. The daughter of the Minister of Settlement Affairs, Oret Struk, flees to Italy to escape ritual abuse in her own family. Journalists uncover a network within Orthodox sects. A closed hearing is held in Parliament. Victims give testimony. And then, silence again? We are publicly presented with two systems of law. One for us, another for them. That's exactly why the modern world order simply has no answer to the Epstein files. In this episode, we will go step by step, in detail, to uncover what is hidden from view in this high-profile case. Why did they bring barrels of sulfuric acid to the island? Why is Karina Shuliak, a native of Belarus and the personal administrator of Jeffrey Epstein, who was mentioned in his will, still not of interest to prosecutors? How did Jeffrey operate through the International Institute for Peace, which is connected to the UN? What was happening at the other property that ended up in the island's media shadow, at the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico? About this and much more in this video. When we talk about Epstein's sinister island, the same image almost always shows up in media coverage. A secluded paradise where the elite hide from prying eyes. But what if this is just a facade? A convenient and carefully constructed set? And now, let's continue to explore our own reality. The International Institute of Peace, affiliated with the UN. A prestigious organization with offices from New York to Bahrain. The head of the institute, Terje Rud Larsen, received $650,000 from Epstein. Rud Larsen will only resign in 2020 when the U.S. Department of Justice publishes their correspondence. Editor Svetlana Pozhidaeva met the financier through the modeling business in 2008. 4 years later, he helped her enter diplomatic circles through that very same Peace Institute. According to Pozhidaeva, IPI served as a tool of control for Epstein. The financier managed her visa status, housing, and finances, and the institute itself, at his direction, prepared her travel documents for the US and the EU. In addition to Pozhidaeva, another Russian citizen was recruited through IPI. Working in the organization from 2016 to 2019, she eventually began introducing other women to Epstein herself. Her lawyer confirmed that the financier had abused her. The true scale of his network could have been revealed by the Belarusian girl Karina Shuliak. For 10 years, she was his personal administrator, kept lists of tasks, and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars from his cards. Upon her return, she inherited $100 million real estate and that very island. It is known that he even planned to propose to her. But to this day, little is known about her exact whereabouts. It is believed that she lives in New York. The prosecutor's office isn't investigating. She is not mentioned in the victim's testimonies as an accomplice to the crimes, but she definitely can tell a lot about the guests of Epstein's island. Isn't that the secret behind her under-the-radar status? Who is he?
Сложно.
You can't fully grasp this high-profile case without examining Epstein's history. Jeffrey grew up in a poor New York family. His mother was a teacher, and his father was a gardener. He attended 2 universities, but didn't graduate from either of them, yet he was always striving for financial success. In the mid-70s, Epstein taught mathematics and physics at the prestigious Dalton School in Manhattan. He wasn't an outstanding teacher, but he was popular. Soon, at a social event, he was introduced to a top manager of the investment bank Bear Stearns, where he quickly got a job. When he was hired, Epstein lied about having a college degree. When the deception was discovered, management chose to ignore it. Even back then, he was known for his numerous affairs and for helping colleagues meet women. That's how one of the executives introduced him to influential Wall Street circles. Epstein was becoming a go-between for elite circles. By the age of 27, he had become a partner at Bear Stearns, but soon violations were discovered within the company: embezzlement and insider trading. After getting off with a fine, Epstein left the firm. Then he worked with the British Lees family, from where he was fired for embezzling money on Concorde flights. In the 1980s, he was involved in shady financial schemes, including tax evasion and working with Stephen Hoffenberg's Ponzi scheme. The projects often ended in scandals, but Epstein always managed to avoid personal responsibility. By the late 1980s, he was already a millionaire, returned to Bear Stearns as a client, and was actively moving in elite circles. An important stage was his collaboration with billionaire Les Wexner. Epstein convinced him of the inefficiency of his employees and gained almost complete control over his finances. Over time, he acquired luxurious real estate and became part of high society. During this period, he became close to Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of a British media tycoon. She didn't mind his relationships with very young women, and over time, she even started recruiting them for him. Epstein developed a reputation as someone who used intimate relationships to achieve his goals. A typical story: when Wexner was about to get married, Epstein sent the model Stacey Williams to him. With children, that
Сексуальней. И спросить,
it would be good. Going back to 1993, she was at an event in Trump Tower, where, according to her, the future U.S. President Donald Trump was getting handsy. In 1993, Bill Clinton became president. Epstein sponsored his campaign and later helped the influential Lynn Forrester get a favorable divorce. In gratitude, she arranged his first in a series of private meetings with the president. When Epstein's mother fell ill, Clinton personally sent her a letter of support. In short, Jeffrey gained lasting White House access at that time. His circle of clients expanded: heirs of Johnson & Johnson, Rockefeller Charitable Foundations, future Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and the famous lawyer Alan Dershowitz. By the late 90s, Epstein's fortune had grown to about $300 million. The money moved through a complicated network of J.P. Morgan bank accounts. It is believed that bank employees might have known that large sums were being spent on payments related to the exploitation of minors. In 1998, Epstein bought Little St. James Island in the Virgin Islands for $8 million. The offshore jurisdiction allowed for reduced taxes, and the island itself later became the most famous architectural site associated with his name. In a criminal complaint by the Virgin Islands authorities, this island was described as a place specifically adapted for the exploitation of young women and minors, including abuse. Essentially, it was a place where wealthy people could fulfill their darkest desires with impunity. But this is only the starting point in the story of Epstein's Island, which he himself preferred to call Little St. James. The island was a small piece of land, about 30 hectares. Despite its modest size, It was densely built up and functioned as a closed private residence. In addition to the two main buildings, there were guest houses, tennis courts, a helipad, an isolated lagoon, and several small structures of unclear purpose. Among them, a low building with white and blue stripes attracted special attention. It was claimed that it used to have a golden dome, which was destroyed by a hurricane. In the documents, the building was listed as an octagonal music pavilion, but in reality, it was very different from the drawings, resembling a bathhouse in the Arabic style. Its true purpose is unknown. There are rumors that it was a kind of temple for certain rituals. After purchasing it, Epstein launched a large-scale reconstruction. The contractors completely removed the natural vegetation and expanded the residential complex. The central feature was a villa with cream-colored walls and a turquoise roof. By the end of the 2000s, the infrastructure had expanded. Dozens of employees worked here constantly, and a library, a private movie theater, and a Japanese bathhouse were added. The logistics were set up through nearby St. Thomas. Epstein would fly there by private jet, then transferred to a helicopter to Little St. James. The island had a water desalination system for complete self-sufficiency, and development of the area continued right up until Epstein's arrest, with some buildings still under construction. There were plenty of strange details as well. Life-sized plastic cows were found on the property, which, according to the staff, were periodically moved around. There were also mentions of a large sundial near the beach and some disturbing rooms with a dental chair and masks on the walls. From early 2018 to mid-2019, Epstein's private planes regularly landed at the St. Thomas Airport, on average about once every 3 days. Because of its scandalous reputation in the media, the island has acquired many unofficial names: Little Girl Island, Sin Island, Orgy Island, Pedo Island. According to the testimony of one of the employees given to the FBI, Epstein discussed the idea of creating a sort of harem of young girls on the island, and he considered large-scale architectural projects, including the construction of a complex in the style of the Spanish Alhambra in Granada. In 2020, the Attorney General of the U.S. Virgin Islands stated that girls were mostly brought to the island by helicopters from St. Thomas. The prosecution materials also included claims about the extremely young age of some alleged victims, as young as 14, and in some statements, cases were mentioned involving even younger ages, down to 12. Epstein, meanwhile, built close ties with the authorities of the U.S. Virgin Islands and directed funds to various educational and charitable initiatives in the region. The head of one of his affiliated companies, Southern Trust, was the governor's wife, and an architectural firm owned by a relative of the region's leader was involved in the island's development projects. In addition, he financed the election campaign of Stacey Plaskett, who represented the Virgin Islands in the U.S. Congress. There is another location that is rarely mentioned, the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. A former employee of Epstein claimed, "The bodies of at least 2 victims are buried right on the property." In 2019, this anonymous employee, in a letter to Albuquerque mayoral candidate Andy Aragon, offered to show the exact burial site for 1 Bitcoin. Aragon immediately forwarded the message to the FBI, but the investigation has only just begun. The huge Zorro Ranch was avoided for years. Although local politicians knew very well what was hidden behind those fences. The locals had one word for this ranch: Playboy. But let's get back to the island. A 2018 order was recently discovered for the delivery of about 1,250 liters of sulfuric acid there. And this delivery coincided with the start of the FBI investigation. Apparently, the sulfuric acid hid many things we'll never discover. And most importantly, who else was on the island besides Epstein and his victims? Bill Gates visited the island several times. The loudest activist, philanthropist, and expert in telling ordinary people how to live. Among the other guests were Google co-founder Sergey Brin, U.S. Secretary of Commerce, and businessman Howard Lutnick, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, and the director of the MIT Media Lab, Joy Ito. In the early 2010s, Little St. James was periodically mentioned in Epstein's correspondence with Elon Musk. At the same time, there is no confirmed evidence that Musk ever visited the island. In one of the letters, he asked Epstein about the craziest party he could possibly throw. Epstein's convicted associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, stated during court proceedings that the model Naomi Campbell might have visited the island. The case files contain evidence of visits by well-known scientists. The artificial intelligence specialist Marvin Minsky visited the island. Officially, it was stated that he was there as part of a scientific event. And physicist Stephen Hawking was also there. Later, Epstein claimed in correspondence with Maxwell that he was ready to pay a reward for refuting rumors about Stephen Hawking's possible involvement in any inappropriate actions. Some of the accusations concern contacts with representatives of the political and royal elite. In 2022, Virginia Giuffre stated that Prince Andrew, a member of the British royal family, had sexually abused her 3 times, including an incident on the island when she was 17 years old. Another witness claimed that she participated in private meetings on the island and saw former U.S. President Bill Clinton there. Who will be held responsible for this? Despite the fact that Epstein clearly could not have committed such a monstrous crime alone, so far only he and Ghislaine Maxwell have been held accountable. Ghislaine was charged with 6 federal offenses. 4 of them were related to her involvement in Epstein's criminal activities from 1994 to 1997. She assisted and facilitated the abuse of minors. According to the investigation, Maxwell gained the victims' trust, took them to the movies and shopping, and then brought them to Epstein's residences. She received massages in the presence of the girls, or made them do the same, sometimes personally participating in the rapes. Despite the billionaire's influence, 4 victims testified against his accomplice. 2 of them became victims at the age of 14. The other 2 charges concerned giving false testimony to the court in 2016, when she denied her involvement. As a result, she was found guilty on 5 out of 6 counts. In 2022, a Manhattan court sentenced Maxwell to 20 years in prison and a $750,000 fine. She had the audacity to file an appeal, but it was denied. She is currently serving her sentence in a minimum security women's prison in Texas. Her story is typical for people who crave power. Even back in college, it was clear that she was only interested in power and money, recalled a classmate from Oxford. When she hugged you at a party, she would always look over your shoulder to see if there was someone more powerful around. And, as you can imagine, she found them. It was Ghislaine who brought Epstein into the circle of rich and influential people, introducing him to Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton. She had the proper upbringing and taste. She knew how to furnish a house, manage a yacht, and entertain guests. A friend of Maxwell said, "You can't buy that, just like you can't buy access to these circles." And what about Epstein himself? Back in 2005, the FBI began investigating. During the search, they found numerous photographs, and more than 30 girls gave testimony. In total, the case involved more than 40 minors. 3 years later, Epstein cut a scandalous plea deal with prosecutors, admitted guilt in organizing prostitution, and paid compensation, avoiding more serious charges. He spent 13 months in prison, the conditions of which raise questions. For example, he would leave prison 6 times a week to work at his office in Miami for 12 hours. A scandal broke out in the U.S. The Palm Beach police chief accused the prosecutor of being too lenient, and the Miami Herald called these conditions the biggest deal of his life. But even for people like that, luck eventually runs out. The charges kept piling up, and in 2019, the U.S. Department of Justice finally launched an investigation. The specifics of American law played a role. The court ruled that prosecutors broke the law by allowing Epstein to get off with a plea deal in Florida and avoid punishment for more serious federal charges. In the summer of 2019, Epstein was arrested again. The FBI broke into his Manhattan home and found thousands of photographs of naked women there. In the safe, they found CDs with handwritten labels: Jan Name Plus Name, Misk Nude Swan, and Girl Pics Nude. And on top of that, they found a lot of cash, diamonds, and an expired Australian passport from 1987. under a different name. The case once again involved 40 underage girls who were brought to the financier's estate between 2002 and 2005. It turns out that only the first decade of crimes caught up with Epstein at all. After that, the billionaire began his final stint in prison, which ended in just a month. At first, he was found in a semi-conscious state with marks of strangulation on his neck. Two versions emerged. Either it was a suicide attempt or his cellmate attacked him. Then, an order came from above for another cellmate to watch over the rich man, and for a guard to come and check every 30 minutes. But, strangely enough, these measures were almost immediately ignored. The cellmate was transferred, and the guard rarely came by. And 3 weeks after the first incident, Epstein was found dead. The autopsy revealed the most likely scenario. Epstein committed suicide by hanging himself with a rope attached to the upper level. Experts noted something unusual about this. Multiple fractures of the neck bones were found, including the hyoid bone. Such injuries are possible in cases of hanging, but they are more commonly seen in cases of strangulation. It was officially ruled a suicide, but disagreements arose immediately. The state prosecutor questioned prison staff and found personnel negligence. 2 guards who falsified records of regular inmate checks received suspended sentences of 6 months each. Ordinary Americans have a theory that this negligence was Jeffrey Epstein's last wish, which allowed him to take his own life. He was buried in an unmarked grave next to his parents, and their names were also removed from the tombstone to prevent vandalism. However, among conspiracy theorists, there is a theory that was recently voiced by Elon Musk's father. Jeffrey Epstein is alive. But let's get back to the question of the number of punishments. What about all these names of royals, presidents, physicists, and others? How? Some only suffered reputational damage, others lost global brand ties. But what does this mean for those whose wealth exceeds the GDP of entire countries? If there is no higher law above a person, this island becomes a logical ending. Here, they've built the perfect sanctuary of the new ethics. The global elite wrote their own moral code. Their main principle is terrifyingly simple. You can do anything you can get away with.
В системе глобалистов работает правило. Открытость без наказания означает согласие.
They show, we see, and we stay silent. And our silence is an acknowledgement of their power. Our attention is diverted to internal elite squabbles. But maybe the main question isn't who else is on the passenger lists of the Lolita Express, but who today is actually able to say no to them. No, that's the question. Share your thoughts in the comments, rate the video, and see you next time. A. Semkin. Proofreader, Egorova Valia. Subtitles, Dima Torzak.